Hi Growth Track hosts. We are doing week 1, and really the idea behind these is we just wanted to walk through each of the weeks of Growth Track, give you sort of a, why did we do some of the things that we did, talk through the goals and the next steps, because those are the two biggest pieces of content that we really carry as hosts. And again, if you haven't had a chance to watch the video on just the host role in general, I would encourage you to go back and do that first.
For sure.
And so Ben, as we step into week 1, one of the things that we've talked about is that you are really a leader in the room, and you are carrying sort of what it means to go through Growth Track, and you're in it with them, but you kind of know the way. And so can you talk a little bit about those goals?
Yeah, I think to start, there's an overall goal of Growth Track, right? And that overall is really to help introduce them to the, some steps into discovering what their purpose is. So that's the overall goal. And every video that we play every week, we really start saying, hey, this is the goal. This is where we ultimately want to take you.
Yeah.
And then we also have goals for each week.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the week 2 video, or the week 2 Growth Track event, we're going to say, hey, this is where we're going. This is where we really want you to understand what it means to know God from week 1. So really there's kind of 2 parts to week 1, right? There's that salvation part and trusting Jesus for salvation, but then there's also the life long trusting part as well.
Yeah, that ongoing relationship with Him. So you'll notice even in the slide deck that is part of Growth Track, we've really we sort of like put it exactly on the slide, because in a lot of ways sometimes that's what people are like, so what? I mean, that was great. But those targets really help you as a host to be able to know, like, this is why I would tell a story here in this way. And so that you carrying the overall Growth Track goal, as well as, hey, we've got 2 goals for you today. So by the end of today, here's what it's going to look like.
Yeah, for me as a participant too, like if I'm in a room or going through something, I love knowing where it is that we're going. And I think in the weekend service, you kind of experience this when Ben gives his bottom line, or whoever teaching on a weekend, they give that bottom line and say, hey, this is the bottom line of my talk. This is where we're going. And then they take us on the journey of getting there. So I think that's some of what we were hoping to have happen in this as well.
Absolutely. So when you think about part 1 of week 1, so now that you've talked through the overall Growth Track goal, you've shared what the week 1 goals are, we've done that little icebreaker piece, and then Ben's teaching for part 1 is really that salvation piece. What does it look like to take the first step of trust? And I think this is where, sometimes people will say, well, I've already done that, or I already know it. And there's a part of me that I just think there's so much for us to receive in all of that, and remembering everything that happens at that first step of trust, that all of it starts there. And so Ben really teaches about that, and as he walks through that, as there's fill-ins through the workbook, so it's always good to give them a heads up of what page you're on, let them know that there's going to be fill-ins, as it's somebody's first week in the room. So that's the other thing too, is not everybody starts at week 1, but we have lots of people who do. But just reminding them that the video will be has fill-ins, and if they miss any, it's okay. We can help you get it filled in. And so Ben teaches through that and then walks through some next steps. I would say in a real tangible way, your role as a host at the beginning of a Growth Track experience is that welcoming, and it's family room, and we're so glad that you're here, and you're using people's names, and really helping them to know that they are so welcome, and that they matter in that space. But then in a lot of ways, we also then are equipping them for what it looks like to take a step whenever they're ready to take it. So there's no assumptions here that these that these are check boxes that we need to take or do.
Right.
So at the end of part 1, Ben offers a couple of next steps. Do you want to talk about those?
Yeah, one of the next steps. So that first video, he's talking about salvation. So one of the next steps, or natural next steps, is once you've made a decision to follow Christ, is to let other people know about it through baptism. So baptism is offered, like it was in previous growth tracks. This growth track as well, this version of it will offer baptism to our guests. So we'll tell them, hey, we have everything that you need. Maybe you didn't make that decision coming here, you weren't ready to be baptized, but today you've made that decision, like, I'm going to do it, but I didn't bring anything. You know, we have everything here for you. You'll have a baptism team in the room that's ready to equip them with their stuff and get them ready for those next steps.
Yeah,
as well.
I think as a host too, this is again, we had talked about in being a host how language is so important. And so one of the things that I think that we do when we host is that coming off of that, you have an opportunity to talk a little bit about your own baptism story.
Yeah.
So a really good example of this is if you go back and say, hey, that first step of trust for me into this kind of looked like this, and 2 or 3 sentences, really short, to the point, but it helps again to breathe some life into it, and that these have been the steps that you've taken too. So baptism is one. If they do not yet have a relationship with Jesus, they aren't even sure about any of this stuff, then a starting point group or jump start are the 2 other options that are offered. So
yeah, and I love that we offer that. You know, someone who's like, hey, you know, I've heard what Ben said, but I'm just not ready to make that decision yet. To be able to offer them starting point, which really is a chance for them to go into a group setting and have more conversations about who Jesus is. And then Jumpstart as well, I think, are great next steps for people.
Yeah, and I should have said too that baptism Bible study is also a piece of it. So this preparation piece, darn it, I was not prepared. But having that baptism Bible study right, you know, at your fingertips, it's on a slide, but you can also show it to them. And that's another great step for somebody who's like, I mean, I was baptized as a baby, or my parents said this, or I did it at whatever point. Again, we don't have to have all the answers, but we can certainly point them to the places that offer some of that. So, so those are really the next steps that are offered after part 1, and then we jump back into Ben's teaching on part 2. This is where he steps into the lifelong and ongoing relationship pieces with Christ. So much depth here. I mean, gosh, this is one of those where it's like, how do you talk about this in 10 minutes or less?
Right. Yeah, I love part 2. Just, you know, some people will be like, oh, I've done that. I've made a decision to follow Christ. I've been baptized, but you know, what's next for me? And really video 2 addresses that lifelong journey of trusting and receiving his promises. And there's a resource that we point to at livingitout.tv, which is Promises of God, that people can go to and kind of see some of the promises throughout Scripture as well. Yeah,
so I think, again, that teaching, it comes then to a point where we get to offer next steps, and Ben is doing this in his teaching, but this is where we get to say how that really looks. Here's the app. Here's how you access it. It's on my phone. Here's the Living It Out. And we offer copies of the Bible and some of the other things that you have an opportunity to talk through. So I think it's just key as well that those next steps cards that we have as part of Growth Track, they are really what drive our connections with those guests beyond their experience inside the room. So the more that you as the host can elevate that as an opportunity for us to, we want to get it right. And so if you can fill out the front, we want to know that Ben Bockert was Ben Bockert and he was here. And then that indicating of next steps on the back of it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it seems like a silly detail, but it is important for when they sign their name. Even if they were there like, oh, I've been here, this is my 3rd week or whatever, we still want their name and their email and all their information so we can make sure we have the right person.
Yeah. So that really brings us to the end of week 1, and I think this is where, again, the goals of week 1 are really critical, that we're helping people to understand sort of that salvation piece, so first receiving Jesus and then continuing on in a relationship with him, and then how does knowing God help us step into our full purpose. So thanks for watching week 1.